Hello and welcome to our midweek conversation at First Baptist Sweetwater, where we strive to be the first responders of God's love. My name is Jerry Hendricks. We've been talking about transitions in our church, and I'm here with one of our transition leaders, T. Hamilton, who will be our pastor on September 1st, but who's already assuming pastoral roles. I don't know how you can keep putting this off, Teak. It's your.
Oh, I can.
You're Pastor Teak.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Not yet. Unless you want to say I was Pastor Teak when I was family minister, or as I am that, then I can do that too.
Okay. Well, hey, so these last episodes that you and I spend together, I told you I wanted to do some things that were intentional in terms of kind of passing the torch.
Right.
You know, from my experience here.
Yep. Still looking for a CD player
and
to play the
our
Bob
friendship.
Wills.
I was going to ask you how you like Bob Wills.
Still looking for a CD player to try it out.
Okay, so.
But did you see that my mom commented?
Yes.
So I don't know if that's a lack of, like if she failed me on that part by not letting me know who Bob Wills was, or if like that was just condemnation that I should have. I don't know what her reply was. I haven't talked to her since I didn't find that out.
You mean you haven't spoken to her since she posted?
Right, not out of like anger. I mean, just important stuff like we talked about softball shirts.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good deal. It concerned me.
How many times did you play that CD?
I played it once.
Okay, all the way through?
I'm sure I didn't.
Okay.
But it did stay on my shelf.
Okay.
Yeah. But it was to be seen and not heard.
Yep.
So this week, Tika, I have another something to pass along to you.
Yep.
And inform you, except for cleaning up some computer files, your new office is cleaned out.
Okay.
And so it's almost ready for the move-in.
Okay.
I feel like that's imminent.
It's terrifying.
So I'm giving you this bat. Now, I'm not giving you this bat because of softball season starting this week.
Right.
Even though I know that's a big deal to you. And,
it is.
And I want to bring up a point of correction.
Okay.
I think it's confusing when you tell people that you're in a non-competitive league because you make a big deal every year about winning the trophy.
Oh. Well, it's still non-competitive.
As long as you're winning.
True.
Okay, just so we clarify.
We didn't win last year.
Well, just so we clarified for our audience, I still don't understand. I don't think we clarified it all.
We did not win last year.
I know some people on this team, and I know how they feel about softball.
Right.
And they're showing up to win, and I think that's competing.
I don't know. I don't know. Everybody gets a trophy.
Well,
except for the teams that didn't finish first.
So that's slower, except for the teams.
So maybe this is going back to the good old days when not everybody got a trophy.
That's right. And why we don't have the trophy in here this year like we have in previous years.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like I've let the church down.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
We had more fun, I think, than most teams. We had 23 people who would show up to the game, and you have to rotate them all in and out.
And folks, that wasn't including the fans. That's just the people that would be on the field at any given time.
And so it was fun. So that's why it's non-competitive. We have fun.
Okay. Well, so back to the fun of this bat. When I got to First Baptist Church Sweetwater, there were a couple things. There were some things in the office that were left that I guess the next pastor needed to review and cull at their own discretion. But I didn't understand the bat sitting next to the door. So I went back to my context clues, which goes back to one of my references yesterday, A Few Good Men.
Right.
You know,
I knew that quote, by the way.
For Tom Cruise, the bat was his thinking bat. And so, not knowing why this bat was there, I adopted it as my thinking bat. Now, occasionally I took it to staff meeting.
Yes.
But I think I reminded everyone that it was a thinking bat. It wasn't a disciplinary bat.
Right.
I didn't I?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, it's now. I'm passing this along to you for your office.
For thinking.
For whatever you repurpose this in the way that you see fit.
Well, it will not be a softball bat. It is illegal for that.
It's just a pastoral bat is all I know.
Which I don't know how many pastors have a pastoral bat, but I feel...
Or that would admit it.
Let's just say I'm much more excited about, impressed with this than the Bob Wills City.
Well, always looking at an entrepreneurial opportunity. Should this be something that you and I pursue together?
Possibly.
Creating and developing pastoral bats?
Yeah. I mean, this is the Babe Ruth baseball bat, it says. That's high quality right there. I'm in.
Well, yeah, and I the only other conclusion, I thought maybe things were a lot more difficult here before I got here.
There's no dents, so it wasn't ever used for those difficulties.
Well, so if anyone has seen this bat or witnessed this bat in any fashion,
you're not getting it back.
You might let us know.
But you're not getting it back.
But yeah, you do not get the bat back. It will not return. So
excellent.
Well, hey, Sunday I tried to go a second step on this conversation with our church about new beginnings. Really, I feel like, for me anyway, pressing in on how important it is that we start fresh. But there is something about being able to start fresh with someone who already has invested 14 and a half years here.
Right. It's definitely a different type of starting fresh.
Right.
But I thought the service or the passage you used, not a typical passage to use for the conversation the way you directed it, but I really liked it. Like, it fit. I understood it. Yeah. Talking about the first deacons and just finding the places to serve and doing it.
Right.
But still being that there's a qualifier there that, they were still expected. Even though they were just handing out food, they were still expected to be people of wisdom and God followers. And I mean, that was really... It was good. It was a twist that I wasn't expecting.
Well, I think when you go back to the two qualifications that were mentioned last week in terms of the next apostle of walking with God, and then the believing in the power of the resurrection, and this week prayer, and what was the second part? In the Word. That 4 really good qualities for setting up the leadership here and an understanding, and hopefully people start to develop their faith to a place where they're all seeing some of those characteristics show up in their life. But that's not required to pick up trash when you see it on the floor.
Exactly.
So the model that I used, and I think I shared last week that I got my weeks kind of off center on how I wanted to develop each one. I did a much better job Sunday of saying what I intended to say and having to pick up some of the pieces from last week that I didn't feel like that I handled very well. But what I wanted to say, and I want our church to understand, is that we may have a mindset that the staff does everything, but let's go ahead and personalize that. We're talking about our friend Teak. We're talking about our pastor, the next pastor, and it's not fair to think that we see something that needs correcting and we expect Teak to do everything, or the next pastor to do everything.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it goes back when you started out saying, let me tell you something that I've been asked or something that's happened. Then you said, someone asked me, I was like, oh, thank goodness. I thought you were going, because I've had lots of questions where, hey, last minute Sunday morning, this isn't working. There's a light out.
Right.
All right, replace the bulb. I mean, if it
that would have been a lot kinder when I guess I regret using the bathroom illustration.
No, I wouldn't, because we've had that before.
Exactly. And I don't think people understand that those kinds of things happen to us. And so, and you could go into, and this isn't just our church. I think it's churches and the mindsets and tendencies that membership has in regard to how things get done or how things get fixed.
Right.
And what you and I've learned from our friend Wes Henson, who preaches and teaches leadership, he uses 3 questions.
Right.
And that's the basis for what I use Sunday. That's those 3 questions on an awareness of what's going on, and probably in the context of a church, I think I used the word at one point, ownership, really taking ownership of our property, taking ownership of our teaching, taking ownership of our discipling, every aspect. We want to own that because we're a part of this community.
Right.
And then, sometimes it's we need we need someone to help do that or fill in that process. And the last part was, who can I get to help? That's actually developing leaders.
Yeah, develop other disciples.
Which we've witnessed this in a couple of experiences of parents volunteering or with their children to do some service here at the church. Like something as simple as making sure that the candle's blown out at the end of every service during the season. Yeah.
Right after the Easter.
Yeah, and so, or folding programs or things like that. And so those are things that I think it takes time for us to kind of gain in that understanding. But if we can understand that we're not the church that we used to be, or we're not the church that you may have come from, but we're a place where we take care of one another and we take care of our property and our folks here. And
it shouldn't change even if you have a staff of 4, 5, 6, whatever it is. Like that should be a way that, because you mentioned being a family, that's something you should intentionally look at all the time, no matter how big the staff is, that we're all in this together. And there's that intentionality of when you walk into a room, you look around, you see it through not your eyes that you always see it with, but through the eyes of a guest. I've gotten here at least the last 2 Sundays, and we've had the influx of crickets because that's that time of year.
Cricket season.
And 2 different guys have been sweeping up crickets and get them written, because you can sweep them on Wednesday, you can sweep on Saturday. They're going to be back, and they're cleaning those up and getting them out of there. So that's intentionality. Sometimes you just step over a dead bug.
Right.
But it's different when you look at it and say, oh, I don't want someone else to have to step over a dead bug.
Right. And we have a number of folks that do these things as volunteers, and sometimes they're not here. And I think that's the thing where we get in a bind sometimes, is that no one else picks up the slack, even though they saw it, just because they're used to someone else coming along and doing something. Right. And, it's definitely a mindset that I believe that a healthy family can develop. I didn't... The other teaching point that I felt like that you could go into pretty in depth was the idea of being a single family. One of the commentators I read made a real big deal in their interpretation of those verses based on that one thing, and kept referring to it as being a single family. Right. And so, or what we would say is one family, not multiple families, but. So yeah, there's a lot, for a church to learn, and a lot of places for a church to grow. And it doesn't, like you said, doesn't have anything to do with the size church. One of the largest churches in America had one of the largest volunteer forces of any church in America also. Right.
It's not about being cheap. It's about taking care of what God has given you.
Right.
And taking responsibility and love for that.
Stewardship and ownership, So the next couple of weeks, I want to turn a corner and kind of talk about something different. This next week, I want to really focus on a person's individual faith. The last 2 weeks, I've talked about congregational health, the way a congregation relates to a staff. But this week, I want to really kind of retreat, I guess would be a good word for that, and really let us think about our own faith. Because ultimately, that plays out into congregational life.
Right.
And so I'm looking forward to that one.
Good. So I don't know where you're going with it or how you're going with it, but we have a tendency to be very private about faith in Baptist life, and maybe even evangelical life. It's between me and God. But we forget about the importance of the community, that even what God tells us through Scripture should be run through the community of believers over the last 2,000 years. Like, it's not just about individualized faith, it's about living that out within community, and you can't ignore either one of them. I think you said that about being a disciple. You can't be a solo disciple.
Right. And I was just thinking that I think that's where I don't know where that term comes from, that it's between that person and God, because it's not. When you look at, and I think part of it is you look at, it's the context that we develop. And so the context for the New Testament was Old Testament rabbinic teaching and how people learned.
Right.
And faith is a very public thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really intended to be a private thing.
Right.
It's not intended to be something that's braggadocious, and Jesus addressed that. But I think we turn that into something that it never says there.
Yep.
That it's just up to that person and God. In that case, then we would never, I think, encourage people to commitment or to make decisions.
To gather together?
Yeah, because at that point, we could just, do that thing of, well, that's just between that person and God.
Right.
The idea of being a disciple is a part of understanding that living your faith in public life matters.
Right.
And so it's I think it's interesting that in the life of church that where we would need that most, we need those role models. Our children need those role models of adults who are doing things that are demonstrate being a disciple.
Mm-hmm.
They need to see those role models. If it's all just up between you and God, then they never see that development. And so hey, that's a good little road that you took us down there.
Well, I had the conversation with somebody about prayer just the last couple weeks about the reason they didn't want to pray in public. Well, Sermon on the Mount, God says stay in your closet, or Jesus says stay in your closet. Well, true, but that has to do with the heart. Like it says, don't do it like the pagans who stand on the corner and they want everybody to see them do it, because then you got your audience. Do it in the quiet of your closet, do it in your prayer closet, whatever. But it's the heart of it. It doesn't say don't do it. It says don't do it like they do. And so you still pray. You still talk to God, because how will a child ever learn to pray unless they hear others do it?
Right.
They don't know what they're doing. How will young believers who just come, if all they see is someone on TV doing it, they might be getting the someone on TV, the street corner view of it.
Like Ricky Bobby. If anyone's listened this far into the podcast and is familiar with that movie, Ricky Bobby's Prayer.
We definitely went down in movies just then.
Yeah.
From A Few Good Men to Talladega Nights.
Exactly. But if we're called to make disciples, then we can't do that secretly.
Right.
Bottom line.
Because if we do, that's called a cult.
Yeah. A cold or a cult?
Cult.
A cult.
Just because I can't speak because I can't breathe.
Yeah.
It's a cult.
Well, excited about the future here at First Baptist Sweetwater. There will be some changes coming to the podcast. Molly will be joining you on this on a weekly basis. And then do you know yet kind of the direction you're going to take in the preaching?
In the preaching, I've been working on a calendar that goes through Advent, big surprise. Correct. Like you mentioned Sunday, and I did laugh, and you did hear my voice.
That was funny.
That it was me. The first one I'm going to kick off with is disciple making, and talking about our process for discipleship here and what we do with, and that's part of what you've ingrained in me, that you talk about that every year. And then there's a series on the Psalms I'm looking at for the next one, and then living generous life leading into Thanksgiving, and then Advent, of course. This year in lectionary, and I'm veering away from lectionary because it's Mark.
Oh.
And I was like, Mark. And so I'm going with the cast of Christmas.
Okay.
And I think it'll build in. I looked at the prophets passages. That's better next year. And so I did veer away during Advent, which is so unlike what we do and what I'm inclined to do, especially at Advent. But goodness, I love Mark.
Yeah, I know.
I talked about it last week, but not for Advent. I was like, oh goodness.
Well, I know as we think through this, I wish I said this Sunday, and I want people to understand. I'm not sure that I've made myself clear enough in this, in terms of why we waited a month for you to take the reins of the pastoral role. But I know you've been very busy working through things. There's things that people don't understand, like the way that you ran softball as a youth minister and now being pastor. That's got to be passed off.
Yep.
Your involvement in some things in the community in terms of Ministerial Alliance that you were not involved in before. And so it's hard to kind of have a foot in both places. And the month was probably, definitely, maybe not enough time to make that transition, but it's helpful. It was an integral time also, having all of our launch weeks together. And so I think it'll work out fine, and I'm excited about the future and excited about listening to the podcast.
Me too.
Well, great. Well, we look forward. Thank you for listening and letting us be a part of your week, and we look forward to next week, where I pass off. I guess it'll be my last podcast episode, and I'll pass off the last of the items. Yes, to bless our new pastor. So. Look forward to being with you on Sunday. It ought to be fun. We'll see you then.
See ya.